Welcome back. College football smothered and covered. It's been a while. The show has been on hiatus for the end of the summer, but we are back. We are better than ever, and we are going to get you ready for the 2024 college football season. Now, if the show looks different, if the logo looks different, there's a reason why. We are now powered by Locked On. And thank you for making college football smothered and covered powered by Locked On. Your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Yes, correct. Locked On. We are powered by Locked On. I'm very excited to bring you this show on a fantastic network of podcasts, some that you will absolutely be directed to throughout the course of the next coming days, coming weeks, coming months, coming years of this show. We are here, like I talk to you about every single episode, that we've done this to give you, the consumer, the best new media coverage of college football anywhere out there. You deserve it. You don't deserve people yelling at you for no reason on TV. You deserve quality content. So thank you for making me part of your rotation. Thank you for making all the Locked On podcast part of your rotation. And thank you very much for all your loyalty. All right, so it's week 0. It's week 0. It's crazy for me to even say that, because in just a few short days, I'll be traveling to Dublin, Ireland. There will be a game between ACC teams, a conference game taking place in Dublin, Ireland, Florida State and Georgia Tech. We're going to talk a lot about that game. We're going to preview both of those teams on today's edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. And a tease you will hear from Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key a little bit later in the week. Sat down one-on-one with him last week, and we'll have that for you here on College Football Smothered and Covered. But let's talk Seminoles. All right, let's talk Seminoles. Florida State, to me, is so interesting. It's an enigma, so to speak. You kind of want to knock them on the door and say, who are you? Are you here? Who are you going to become? Who moved into this neighborhood? Because this is not the same Florida State team. I think that's fairly obvious. The departures, the defections, it's a whole new roster, a revamped edition, but potentially one that can still win a national championship. Not to say that they're capable of doing that right now. They aren't. Florida State, right this very second, not capable of winning a national championship. But they've got a fantastic coach in Mike Norvell, who I think is one of the top 5 or 6 coaches in the entire country. And they've got a foundation for success that has been established. Yes, it was established. And I know you can say, okay, well, it's 1 year. Well, yeah, it's 1 year that was really split up into 2, because they went from absolute juggernaut running through the entire ACC to, oh God, how do we finish this thing off and go undefeated into Selection Sunday? And they found a way to do both. They found a way to do both. So that speaks to character, speaks to heart, speaks to coaching. This team is so interesting, too, because it has such a familiar face taking the snaps. And that, of course, is DJ. I think it's unfair to him that he got branded so quickly. He got branded so quickly as a bust. And let's look back a little bit on his career. He actually committed on SiriusXM on Full Ride with my good friends Chris Childress and Rick Neuheis. The only commitment they've ever had on that show. He comes in during the COVID year when Trevor was out with COVID, lights up Notre Dame. Now, their defense couldn't stop Notre Dame. That's why ultimately Clemson lost that game. But DJ set multiple records in that game. There's a reason the hype built into a roar going into that 21 season. Because it was like, okay, everything's going to be cool. Everything's going to be cool. And I think what happened was that maybe we just assumed that it was more of the system that made Clemson successful rather than just being Trevor and Deshaun. And that's okay. Trevor and Deshaun are phenomenal. DJ's still very good too. I think you go back and look at what he did last year. He himself said that the system at Clemson didn't fit him. I think the system at Oregon State actually did. And the numbers don't really jump out. But just over 2,300 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and was used in a rather effective way on the ground. He wasn't a dual threat quarterback. They used him on design runs up the middle. Go back and watch that week 0 game against San Jose State. He was a force in that game. No, San Jose State, but whatever. He was good. And they had a great tandem with Martinez to help. But the offense was not tempo-based. It was very deliberate. Whereas Clemson was frenetic. At Florida State, it's going to be a little bit of both, but with better weapons around than he had at Oregon State. So I'm still a DJU believer. I think that the hype that he had twisted him into a ball of nerves that he couldn't get out of it. And Oregon State allowed him to relax. And now he's going to Florida State in a system that works, in a system that is designed for his tools. What were the questions we had at Clemson with DJU? Couldn't throw a curveball. He was kind of like a diet version of Joe Milton. It was kind of off, right? The timing was never really there. But he can stretch the field. And he can power between the tackles on the ground. And plus, he's with Mike Norvell, who is not going to be married to his system. He's fully capable and has a track record of developing his offense perfectly to whatever his quarterback skill set is. And he's got weapons around him. And I think that's the most important part, is that we saw last year with Martinez at running back, that 1-2 punch is really effective. It's kind of like a 1-2-3 punch, because Lawrence Toafili's still there at running back. He was really good late in the season. In fact, I would say in the ACC championship game, probably one of the most, if not the most important players in that game when he went over 100 yards. Then they get Roydell Williams from Alabama. Florida State is becoming sort of an outpost for Bama cast sauce. So is Texas. But Roydell Williams is flat out stud. Flat out stud. He can follow in Trey Benson's footsteps. So for DJU to be successful, he's got to have players who do different things at running back to take pressure off him. And he does. He does. Because Toafili and Roydell Williams, multi-purpose studs. We know DJU up the middle is strong. We know he can take the top off a defense. And you know Mike Norvell will get those dudes involved on the perimeter as receivers. It's a perfect fit. So I'm still a DJU believer. I really am. Now, people have to get open deep downfield. That's the biggest thing. And that's the biggest question at Florida State is who's going to be Keon Coleman? Who's going to be Johnny Wilson? And there aren't. Like, there's nobody on this team. I know Malik Benson is there. Bama cast off. Let's say cast off. Still very good. But like Keon Coleman came to Florida State as an established stud. Johnny Wilson didn't just suddenly become 6'7". He had been 6'7" for 5 years. Malik Benson's being counted on as the guy. That's the one part of Florida State where you look at him and you say, all right, everything's set up except for one piece, that one missing piece of the puzzle. The tip of that spear is not as sharp as it should be quite yet. But that's why I say this team can be what it was last year before the Jordan Travis injury. This team can be a national championship caliber team because there's only a little hole here, a little hole there defensively, specifically at defensive tackle, at least in terms of rotation. I still like him. I still like it. I think this is the most fascinating opener for a team that's a national championship contender that we've had in a very long time. Because it's not just that Florida State's replacing a bunch of dudes. It's not just that Mike Norvell has proven that he has what it takes to be a superstar in the coaching industry. It's that he's got to navigate something that is extremely unique. He doesn't know how to coach an ACC game overseas when you're the defending conference champions. Nobody does. Like, literally nobody's been in this position before. So this could be a huge game. This is a measuring stick for Florida State. It's a measuring stick because if they go out there and handle business against Georgia Tech, and we will talk about Georgia Tech in the next segment, if they go out and handle business against Georgia Tech, it would be one of the biggest wins in Mike Norvell's career. And I know that's crazy. You probably say, okay, well, yeah, it's Georgia Tech. Who gives a crap? I do, for all the reasons I just said. You need to show you can sustain success. It's a great way to prove it. You need to go in a tough spot and win. There's nobody that knows how to do this, right? In terms of all of the logistics of getting over to Dublin, keeping players on the same time clock and the time zone difference and all that other stuff, not getting caught up in the hoopla. Oh, and then you have a team on the other sideline that is really, really good in Georgia Tech. And again, this is not a pushover, but you're expected to dominate if you're Florida State. You shouldn't be. If you go out and dominate, a massive, massive, massive bullet point on that 2024 resume for the Florida State Seminoles. The biggest thing is, can they just get enough defense? Just enough defense. Certainly on Saturday in Dublin, they're going to need to find a little bit because I think the offense will be fine. But if they can just find ways to pressure the quarterback consistently throughout the course of the season, this team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Coming up, we will talk about Georgia Tech. If you don't know a lot about the Jackets, you need to pay attention. We'll talk about them next. This team is fantastic. I love this team. If you don't know Georgia Tech, you're going to hear about them. They're awesome. Hey, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, that's something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 free weeks of trial for NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel any single day you wish. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. College football is back, and the Locked On College Football podcast kicks off the action with a live season preview, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, August 20th, on the Locked On College Football 24/7 streaming YouTube channel. This 4-part series covers each of the 4 major conferences with discussion on the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC teams, which of them have a shot at the expanded college football playoffs, and more. Be sure to check out this special streaming on Locked On College's 24/7 YouTube channel here on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's talk about those Jackets. They drink their whiskey clear. They're going to be drinking a lot of whiskey, drinking a lot of Guinness over in Dublin. I know a lot of folks from the Atlanta area going over there to Dublin. I'm going over there too to cover it here for College Football Smothered and Covered, but a lot of Georgia Tech folks going over there as well. And they're going to be excited to see a team that there's a lot of hope for. A lot of hope for Georgia Tech around these parts. I don't think folks are realizing it nationally. You're going to hear a lot about them on game day, of course, and the other preview shows leading up to Saturday night Dublin time. Let's get this out of the way. Haynes King is a flat-out stud. He was unfairly branded during his time at Texas A&M. Won the starting job twice, got injured, just a career that was an absolute mess. Comes back, damn near beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa, transfers to Georgia Tech, stays healthy, and bam, becomes a superstar Nearly 3,000 through the air, 737 on the ground, totals 37 touchdowns, and nobody seemed to notice. Nobody seemed to notice. Why? Why? Because it's Georgia Tech. Nobody cares. It's Georgia Tech. What was Georgia Tech's crowning achievement last year? What's the one thing that happened to Georgia Tech that was more prominent and more visible than anything else? It was the Mario Cristobal time management, clock management game. Well, guess who had to do something after Mario mismanaged that time? It was Haynes King. Went down there, bam, bam, touchdown pass. 2 seconds left, ball game. Dude has ice in his veins. And he's a perfect weapon inside of this Georgia Tech offense that is absolutely loaded. And again, you'll hear from Brent Key later on in the week. I did a one-on-one interview with him. That'll air later in the week as we preview this matchup. But it isn't just Haynes King. He's going to get all the headlines. And I think for some teams, you sort of get into a mode where you look past the quarterback. Because we could sit here and talk about Quinn Ewers. But then we naturally go to, okay, what else is there? Because it's high profile, right? Georgia Tech's not high profile. So it's going to be Haynes King, end of conversation. It shouldn't be. Because they've got dudes. Jamal Haynes is back at running back. 1,000-yard back from last year. Worked fantastically in tandem with Haynes King. King scored 10 times on the ground. He was the leading running back in terms of touchdowns. Jamal Haynes had 7. 1-2 punch, 2-1 punch, A and B. Those two guys do it. And I think what's very important is that Brent Key, offensive lineman by trade, wants to attack the ground first and wants to do it in a variety of different ways. And he's not afraid to send Haynes King up the middle. Haynes King is not afraid to go take on a tackler or 5. That's why he got hurt a little bit in College Station. And Jamal Haynes knows it, and he's the beneficiary because those gaps are wide open, and they're going to be even more wide open. Why? 4 offensive linemen. Just flat out maulers in the trenches for the Yellow Jackets. Maulers. What did you lack at Georgia Tech under the Jeff Collins era? Steak. And I say steak because Jeff Collins was a great salesman. Part of the reason he was hired to took that job, they wanted to sell that program in Atlanta. And he did a pretty good job of that. But there was no foundation, right? It was all sizzle. There was no steak. Now, Brent Key's not selling anything. He's going to let his team do the talking. And he's got this team built in a way where they're going to punch you in the mouth. You're going to get back up. They're going to punch you again and again and again and again and again. And you're going to wear down. Because they can run the damn ball. Now, I know the next question will be like, well, okay, what happens beyond that? They can throw it. I don't know if a lot of folks realize they actually have a stud outside in Eric Singleton. And they've got some experience around him. All Haynes King needs to do is find a way to at least pose a threat downfield. He can do more than that. I know he can do more than that. We've seen it. Other defensive coordinators have seen it too. But just pose a threat. Just have a safety looking around going down. Okay, no one's getting by me, right? Singleton can do that. A lot of other guys will be able to do that too. Look for the tight end to be a big part of this attack this year. So I look at Georgia Tech as sort of the Ole Miss of the ACC. And what I mean by that is you kind of check every box offensively for the Jackets, just like we do with Ole Miss. Jackson Dart, 2 wide receivers, deep running back core, veteran offensive line. You sort of check all the way through. And then you look at the defense and you're like, kind of like that exhausted sigh. Like, what's going to happen there? But it goes to shows all of this. Like every time we talk about previewing college, every time we in the summer, the off season, in the winter after the season, we have to realize, and I've said this for so long, we have to realize that defense doesn't win championships anymore. Just enough defense wins championships. And that is a moving target based on the offense that particular team employs, the offense that your opponent employs, like all of it. It's a moving target. Those goalposts are going back and forth. Georgia Tech's defense was horrendous last year. Awful. Awful. But Brent Key recognized that. He hired 4 new defensive assistants and put personal relationships aside and said, look, we're going to make sure everyone is on the same page, because they weren't on the same page. And he talks about this in depth with me. You'll hear that later in the week on the show. But the thing is, they don't have to be great. Just be average. Just be decent. Don't be god-awful. I mean, hell, you could even be mediocre. Just don't be horrendous. And I think this Georgia Tech team can be that. Part of the reason is that they kept a lot of players in Atlanta. They weren't picked apart in the transfer portal like they have been in years past. Jahmyr Gibbs, probably the most high profile of those guys. But just be okay. Just be okay. And in this game against Florida State, just being okay against a team that doesn't really have its identity yet. Like I told you first segment, I think Florida State's going to be really good, but they've still got to figure it out on the fly. Just be decent. Get in DJU's face. Make him make a mistake. One might be all you need. But don't sleep on the Jackets. This is a good football team. If you haven't paid attention, do it, because they might just surprise you on Saturday in Dublin. All right, we'll take a break. We'll talk about the trip to Ireland, but we'll also talk about Connor Stalions, because Connor Stalions was in the news late last week. The Netflix show comes out soon, and there's some takes that I kind of need to rebut a little bit, rebuke a little bit. So we'll talk about that next. Hey, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps you on the ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all of the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, last thing before we hang up the headsets here. All the Locked On crew, thank you for welcoming me to your family. But Connor Stalions, we all know about what he did, the investigation. Now he's hired as a defensive coordinator at Medford High School in Detroit. I saw a lot of people upset about this. I'm like, what? Why? Why are you upset about this? What's the problem? Look, the dude's never going to coach in college. All of us know that. He's never going to coach in college. Should he be able to coach in high school? Yeah, sure. Why not? You're not going to run a sign stealing scandal in high school. Maybe he can still coach ball. Why not let him be a defensive coordinator for a varsity team? I don't care. Apparently, a lot of people did. And I was like, man, it's bizarre. It's a bizarro world to me that people would really care that Connor Stalions is gainfully employed somewhere. I mean, I hope I'm not banished like that if I do something dumb. And speaking of, like, this is something that is kind of a tangent, but Hugh Freeze got basically shadow banned for 4 years from the SEC, 5 years from the SEC. And I'm not condoning anything he did, but if people got banished for 5 years for what he did, there'd be no coaches. I don't condone it. You ever been around college coaches? Love you guys, but I'll do some shady stuff sometimes. But let Connor Stalions coach. Who cares? Let him be a defensive coordinator. All right. So before we wrap up, going to Dublin, leaving Wednesday afternoon. Take the red eye, land in Paris Thursday morning. 1 hour connection to Dublin will be there Thursday mid-morning. We'll have all kinds of coverage from over there throughout the course of the week and the weekend. So looking forward to that. We'll also have that interview, like I said earlier in the show, Brent Key, head coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. He sat down with me earlier in the week, and we'll play that for you in its entirety coming up before the end of this week. And a reminder, thank you for listening to College Football Smothered and Covered, powered by Locked On your first listen today. Now go check the Locked On College Football Podcast. NIL deals never seem to end. Realignment rumors, whatever. All of it. Spencer McLaughlin get you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk to you next time out there. Please share the word, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Listen, let's be honest. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you know how to do the podcast thing. So your friend, your neighbor might not. So go tell them. Till next time, have a great one.